I'm Derek and welcome to Fun Scale Models. This series is building the P40C Tomahawk model, Park Flyer. In this episode, I'll be showing you on how to wrap up construction of the model. So you can see here we have both outer panels and the center panel now complete. Putting together the additional panel really didn't take me that much time, having done the first one prior. Usually only took me about an hour, hour and a half to put it all together, and then maybe another half hour to get all the sanding complete. We'll be next going and mounting the elevator and rudder servos. So within the center section here, we have two servos that get mounted. We have the mount rails already installed, and here we're going to be setting up our rudder servo. I've pre-tested these and marked them as needed. One of the things that you may find is that it doesn't necessarily fit into the slots. So you can use a real small little sanding block. Let's see if that's enough. Yeah, that seems to be working. Now, one of the other things that, just based on this particular design, the servo extends out the bottom here, so you're going to have to sort of support it and cradle it while you're working on it. Use our pin vise to go ahead and drill the holes. All right, so we've got our two mounting holes in place. We'll go ahead and we'll grab our mounting screws. These happen to come with the servo itself. Now, depending on when we get in our final configuration, we may rotate this around so that the horn mount is on this side, but for right now, this is just fine. And there we go. We'll go ahead and we'll mount the second one next. With both servos mounted, it's now time to go ahead and test fit this to the wing saddle of the fuse here. So depending on your servo size, you may have a little bit of trimming needed to be done. So if you can sort of see there, move this out of the way, this is hitting the bottom of the former. So I'll go ahead and I'll trim that up to make sure this sits flush within the wing saddle. Both of our servos mounted now. I did end up turning them around. And one additional tip that you can do is when you've taken these back out is drop a little bit of CA in each one of the holes. That'll help harden up the threads that you put into the wood itself. We need to add one of our easy connectors to the servo horn here. So I'm going to be trimming off one horn half and adding it to the other half. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with the middle one. I'm just using my same pin vise to go ahead and get a starter hole. You may need to use your X-Acto just to clean it up a little bit, to remove any sort of burr. And then testing to see how well it fits. It needs to be opened up a little bit more. You don't want it to be moving around within the hole, but you also don't want it too tight that it won't freely rotate. That looks about right. And there's the retaining clip on the bottom. I just use pliers to lock it in place. And there you go. I just use a side cutter just to trim it off. Just make sure that you've got both pieces so it doesn't go flying across the room. Go ahead and use some sandpaper to clean that up, and we'll go ahead and mount it. set the horn just in place. We're going to do the exact same thing for this one. But something I want to show is if you look inside the fuselage here, you can see kind of those holes. Those are meant to line up with the control horn. So this hole here is where the push rod will come through and will connect that to the elevator and the rudder. So both servos are mounted with the horns. I've used tape to hold the center section in place. The next thing we're going to be doing is setting up and test fitting the control rods. Control rods are from 0.032 wire, or basically 1/32. I'm going to go ahead and bend a slight 90-degree on one end. We'll trim that up as needed later. The next thing we're going to do is feed this through the fuselage. So the way this is set up is it's diagonal. If the horn is going to be on this side, then it's going to come across and mount into this servo here. I did put a small guide hole already. I'm just going to feed this through. Takes a little bit of fitting. There we go. What I'll do next is I'll go ahead and I'll get this mounted into the servo. You can see the control rod has gone through the easy connector and we have it exiting out on this side. I've already done a pilot hole for the control horn. You can see that right there. And these are those micro control horns that we showed in an earlier video. I'm just going to set that in there for now. So what'll happen is this, I'll have to drill this out a little bit, but this 90 degree will sit into the horn. And then there's a little clip that holds it all together to keep it from coming apart. But you can see here, the way that I have it set up is the tension is pushing the wire into the horn versus the other way around. We'll do the exact same thing for the rudder. So there's additional decking that we need to add. There's 1/16 that goes in this bay, and this bay. You can try and do conventional measurement and see how precise you can get, or there's another trick that you can try, and that's just using a paper template. So I have some scrap paper here that I'll be using. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it in various widths. And I will set those in there. And by using the overlap, I get a very flush fit. Then I just mark the points here and there and use it as my template. So you can see the template is a pretty good fit. We'll do the same for this section here and this rear section. Although we do want to leave part of the rear section open so that we can get at the servos. The next area we're going to focus on is installing the removable tail wheel. That's going to go about right in this general area in the fuselage, and I'll show more of that mounting in a few moments. But first I want to show you the wheel itself. So the wheels come with the short kit. They're pre-cut and also have an etched for the hub for you. We're going to be using the same sort of brass inserts that you would use for the main landing gear. This is 1/8 outer diameter tubing. This is going to be attached eventually to our wheel. It will telescope into this 5/32 brass tubing. The first thing I want to do though is just to add a little nice bit of detail is to round the edges of the tire or the wheel itself. We're going to do that in kind of a different way here than you may have seen before. This is a Dremel or rotary tool attachment, something kind of like this one right here. We're going to go ahead and take out the set screw and mount the tires in that. And we might need to just channel it out just a little bit so that it fits better onto the screw. And I'm not gluing these together, not quite yet, because I want to have them separate when I start cutting the channel for the brass tubing. With them pretty snug to each other, and again, etched rim, we're going to go ahead and attach it to the mandrel. Get that snug. Now, something I picked up recently is sort of a battery-operated mini Dremel. It's really kind of neat. I picked it up for less than 30 bucks off of Amazon. It's got quite a few different little attachments. It recharges using a USB plug. Really handy for these small, different sort of projects. If you need the heavy-duty Dremel, it's still available, but this is something you can get very easy, and again, no cord. Now what we'll do is we'll get a piece of sanding block and round the edges. So I have my sanding block here. I've got a couple of different grits. I've got 80, 150, and 220 on this side. So we'll start with the 150 and see how that works. Again, prior to this, I made sure that this was tight and this is tight as well. And then you've got multiple different settings. I'm going to start in the medium setting. I'll probably use just a little bit more. And we'll take a look at it here. Starting to get a nice round shape. A little bit more in some areas than the others, so can I keep going? Not pressing hard. Really letting the weight of the object sort of come on the sandpaper. Well, it's looking pretty good. Still a few spots here or there, but I'll go ahead and I'll lightly touch those up by hand. Next, we'll go ahead and remove this and get it prepared for mounting to the brass tube. So I removed it from the mandrel, and I also marked it so I can make sure that I can line it up later so it's the best fit. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at, this is the prototype's fill-in or plug-in tail wheel. I'm going to measure the distance of this as a starting point. And that is 1/2 inch. So we need to go 1/2 inch from the outside. It looks as though, go ahead and mark this here. About right there is the depth of the rim, and then we'll add 1/2 inch to that. Now what I will do before I actually cut this is I'm going to round this edge here so it'll better fit into already the pre-cut hole. And to clean up the brass using a file. I want to make sure I don't have any burrs that are on the outside so that it'll stop it from sliding in and telescoping into the larger brass piece. Next, I've marked where I'm going to cut out for the brass insert, which will sit right in there. It's light ply, so it cuts pretty easily. Just take your time. You don't want it to splinter. Here we have the trimmed part, and what we'll do next is we'll glue the brass piece in just like that. And here you see the finished product. So a little bit of paint and it'll be all set to go. Next we'll move on to mounting the telescoping piece into the fuselage. So I've taken my 5/32 brass and I've notched a small hole there, and I've also notched it into K3 here. You don't necessarily have to do it this long. My airplane's going to end up being a bit nose heavy, so a little bit of extra weight in the tail isn't going to hurt anything. I'll glue these together, and then later on I'll infill this area here so that the covering has something to attach to. Mounted and all set to go. And it also comes out really easy if need be, but still snug enough to stay there in flight if you want it to be.